Hello and welcome everybody to the EUSCC Week 1 of Phase 1 for Year 10 Smite. My name is Judas Priestley, joined today by Kaizo, and we will be bringing you Yomi Tanuki versus the Niflheim Wargs. Now, it's the first game of this new phase, Kaizo. Both teams looking to make a statement.
Yeah, and this is really the best time that you can do that because this is when you can leave your lasting impression on the season. Obviously, everybody's going to be having their full attention on these games because this is really the first time that we're going to get to see these teams with a full 5v5 structured setting. Obviously, behind the scenes, you've got your scrims and stuff like that going on, some casuals, some ranked you might be streaming, but this is the first time that these teams are going to be taking it 100% seriously and giving us our best look at what the scene is going to look like right now, because obviously these are a lot of players that we're fairly familiar with. We've seen what they're capable of. We know that they can play at the highest level, but now they got to prove that. Now they got to stake their claim.
Yeah, got to stake their claim, and of course this is being played on the previous patch, the 10.3 patch, so we're going to see maybe a little bit of a difference between us and the SPL as we do get on in to this picks and bans phase. Now, we need to maybe remind some people, Kaizo, of the sort of reversion we're going to have to be going through here. Are there any particularly strong picks of the previous patch that you might expect to see today?
Well, 10.3 is going to be the one where, if you will recall back, Judas, that's where they first reworked the brawling. So brawling was a system in Smite that they had for a long time where if you are out of combat, if you have not recently dealt damage to an enemy god, then you receive reduced healing. You don't apply reduced healing, but all of that coming in is going to have a reduction on it. Going into this patch, the 10.3 patch, that has been completely changed, so no longer have that out-of-combat healing debuff applied to you. However, there's a lot of changes that have been made to the individual healers. Like, for example, actually all of them no longer have any power scaling on literally any of their healing abilities. It's only as you level up your god, as you level up the abilities. So that might sound like, you've got a lot less value in healing because you're getting significantly lower numbers. But the fact that it's much more reliable, it's not applied by that debuff anymore, you can sustain out of combat, you can take a small engagement, back up, and then re-engage after you sustain. Healing is in a extremely good spot right now. And that's why you see stuff like this hell taken out overall, and then possibly valued even more than that hell is the Aphrodite that we've pretty much seen picked or banned just about every game that I've watched up until this point.
Yeah, of course, like you say, the healing being changed, so in general and across the board, literally like 100 gods getting changed to mean that in combat healing is a lot less prevalent. It is much lower as a whole. Even we're talking carries and their lifesteal, magical lifesteal, all got severely reduced. So, like you said, the ability to come out of a fight, heal up, group together, and re-engage, it's always going to be so valuable because time to kill right now is shortened down. We seem to have been talking about this TTK time to kill for the last year or so, after the big 9.5 patch where we saw some massive changes to health and everything. Now we've almost flipped the switch a little bit. Now games go down, fights go ahead so fast that healing, like I say, out of combat again, going to be so valuable. And there's a lot of bans coming through here which highly value a little bit of healing.
Yeah, and that's pretty much how you can tell just how strong healing is when Apwash is a character that not only are you considering picking Judas, but taking away this guy top overall, that might reveal the Yomi Tanuki hand a little bit and suggest that they might be looking to draft one of these healers pretty early on, as actually the Wargs lock in their last ban, Judas, and Aphrodite still on the table, which is a little bit surprising to me. So we will actually at least get the chance to see that character.
I mean, you presume get to see it. It all depends on if anyone does value it. And yeah, unsurprisingly so, a Yomi Tanuki looking to pick up this god. Now we all know, or at least we're all aware, that Aphrodite is apparently really strong right now. Like you say, top pick, top ban. But why exactly is this god so strong right now? What makes Aphrodite what she is?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's completely the most recent changes that we saw to her. Going into this patch, the 10.3 patch that we're playing on here, she's received some pretty significant changes to the way that her kit functions. She now has a cooldown reduction applied to the character that she's marked to, as well as also being able to share a percentage of her protections, which makes her. We've seen this character in the past. She used to be like a mid laner. You could maybe put her in solo lane and just kind of leave her in the oven and let her cook up, and then level 20, you say, all right, Aphrodite, time to group up and play the game. You don't really play her there anymore because she's sharing these protections and because you want to get as much value out of that as possible. Aphrodite is now typically considered to be a support character, moreover in that Guardian role. So you can typically expect to see her there and kind of linking up to an ADC, keeping them as safe as possible, and just generally making it next to impossible to kill them.
Well, also on the board here, which is very relevant to talk about, Martikaras picked up here. Now, not a lot of this card being shown yet. There has been very low competitive play since this card has been available. Does, of course, have some inherent anti-heal built into the kit, so maybe as a response to this Aphrodite, but, you know, has some real strengths of their own. Has a lot of lane pressure. Of course, that Storm Prey putting those patches of grass all over the lane can really shake things up and really have some fancy plays coming through, but Discordia and Heimdall being locked in here. Those are two picks I maybe wasn't expecting to see.
Yeah, and it is a little bit interesting specifically for those roles, because I think that the ADC pool right now is fairly deep, but also has some picks that we're typically more accustomed to seeing. I think that traditionally in that slot right now, you're seeing your Ishtar, you're seeing your Kurnanos, things that can box very effectively in addition to being mostly safe, which is typically the selling point of this Heimdall. He's next to impossible to gank. He can use that Bifrost, disengage from combat at a moment's notice. Not to mention having that additional vision whenever he uses that Lash of Horfuth 1 ability. So it is certainly a very safe pick, but maybe not quite as strong in the boxing as we're traditionally accustomed to seeing. And the Discordia kind of falls in a different conversation of utility versus carry potential. This is one that I know that Zeros has enjoyed piloting for quite a while, basically since this character's come out, and it's a lot of very good crowd control and pretty meaningful damage at most stages of the game, while also fueling whatever role you're really driving your composition with by using that passive. So it's something that early on, mostly a utility mage, and then late game can transition into a role where you're more accustomed to seeing the big mage damage come out of it.
Yeah, of course, can spam those abilities across, and this, I believe, is before we've had some major nerfs to Tablet of Destiny, so possibly seeing that item picked up. Now,
Blades
the second phase of bans, there's some real high-tier gods coming through, but most importantly is the fourth pick for Niflheim Wargs being the Ishtar. They already had a Martikaras, so really changing things up, but I guess this is Martikaras mid, and Ishtar in the carry role as we expect to see them. Does this change the concept of this Martikaras pick? Does it quite counter Aphrodite so well from the middle lane?
I don't know if it's specifically to counter the Aphrodite. I do think this character is just incredibly strong in a vacuum by itself. It's kind of like Chiron in a way, where this is a physical character, but you play it more like a traditional mage. You build ability-based, you build full power, you build penetration, and you just cast those abilities from as far away as possible. It is reasonably good CC and also very difficult to avoid damage even at max range. And that's typically why you would see this character valued. The fact that it also has the anti-heal is a little bit of a bonus on top, but I do actually like the way that the Wargs have done this draft, Judas. They've left 3 picks in the top 3 that kind of have a little bit of flexibility. Hebo could have gone mid or jungle, Marty Chorus could have gone mid or ADC, and then Hercules we saw yesterday with the cast with Frog and AJ. Hercules was in the support role, but it looks like the Wargs instead going to be going for a solo lane Hercules, which a little bit more accustomed to seeing as they lock in this Khepri.
Well, we have both sides fully locked in. We have both drafts all lined up. Tried and true. We're going to get ready to see exactly how these two teams will square on up as we head on in to game number 1 between the Yomi Tanuki and
Minions have spawned.
Solo lane spotlight for quite some time, whereas this Rattatasia is going to essentially be making a competitive debut, to the best of my knowledge, in Season 10 here, and it's got some pretty good merit to it. It has very easy ability to trade early on, it does decent damage, has good sustain, good lane clear, and then once you get to level 20, this character will do a lot of damage despite seemingly not taking any at all, as a result of the fact that he's got that Sigil of the Old Guard giving him those additional mitigations. But a lot of the value of this character, Judas, should be coming from rotating out of this lane and making his impact felt elsewhere on the map. He should, at least in theory, be able to make a larger impact on the map as a whole than Kana can on this Hercules, at least for the early and mid stages of this game.
Of course, expecting Deathwalker to be heading over to that mid lane, climbing across that tree and slamming down on an unsuspecting Marticorus in the middle lane. But look at the way both teams are playing. We're seeing a lot of pressure on the left-hand side of the map, which you would expect to go in favor of the Niflheim Wargs via Aphrodite plus Heimdall. But other than that, I'm wondering where we might see some early action. No one seems to be too like kill potential of a lane, right? There's nothing really screaming early fighting here.
I think that if you gotta pick one, it's probably going to be the solo lane or the mid lane. Of course, Marticorus has the ultimate that, you know, it's a self-banish, it does a lot of good damage, it's crowd control immune, you can use it kind of the same way that you might see Freya use that Valkyrie's Discretion ultimate, for those of you who may be not a little bit more familiar with this character. It essentially just gets him out of combat and away from potential damage at a moment's notice. The problem is, he doesn't have the best movement until that ability comes online. Up until level 5, or if the ultimate is down, the Marticorus doesn't have the best ability to evade damage and keep himself safe. So it's really a matter of forcing out that ultimate, then being able to play around him, at which point he is a little bit more vulnerable and will have to play a little bit safer. So Ice can potentially look to, you know, force that cooldown, then play around this mid lane, or can just lean on the solo lane where, you know, Assassin versus Warrior should be a pretty volatile matchup. We'll have to see where he looks to lend his attention, but I think that either one of those two locations could be a pretty reasonable estimation for him.
Well, both junglers heading over to this solo lane to help their solo lanes clear out, although Deathwalker wants to get in and aggressive, but does not manage to get steal off, and they'll just have to scurry on back to their own blue buff and pick that up for themselves. But as we see, you know, both sides sort of spread around the map a little bit, you know, try to work out where they are prioritizing. The solo lane, is that where either one of
hand side where there might be some trouble brewing? Hebo is traditionally kept safe by the Crushing Wave ultimate, which makes him largely damage immune and untargetable, but not completely. Yep. Things that can follow tool when it comes to chasing this guy down and making sure that you can still apply the damage even as he's attempting to disengage. So Ice actually does have a very good matchup into the conventionally late game scaling mage that Hebo is. He could potentially look to lend additional pressure to the jungle it out and then move to the next thing, but I do think the later this game goes and the longer Rapio is left untouched, I think we're going to see a lot more impact from this Hebo as opposed to the Fenrir, which can traditionally at least see a lot of value from not only the early stages but also the mid stages when he's looking to force out some cooldowns with that ultimate.
Yeah, looking to force out cooldowns, particularly the Death from Above from Marticorus, right? If you can get that off the map, it makes it so that it's so difficult for the Marticorus to stay safe, as you previously mentioned. And Fenrir just loves to charge at someone who, A, doesn't have CC immunity, B, doesn't have beads, but most importantly, is on the ground where Fenrir can hit them, you know? Does tend to make a bit of a difference for Fenrir, so surely Ice will be looking to lock down one of these targets who is within reach of themselves. But 7 minutes into this game. It's been slow paced. Is a slow paced game particularly favorable for any one side?
I would say that it's likely to favor the Wargs just because their support is the Aphrodite, right? Which is a character that only gets better with time. This is one of those where you can say it's basically nuclear levels once it gets online, but getting there is a bit more of a struggle. You want some additional levels, some more protections where you're not only keeping the Aphrodite safe, but somebody safe along with her.
Ooh, some aggression now onto Preds. This is the first real fighting I feel like we've seen, but it's just a bit of poking and prodding. It's tough to kill a Khepri even at this phase in the game. Has the Gauntlet of Thieves built up, and no Prophetic Cloak actually coming through. So interestingly enough there, it's not the most prominent item, or at least not an always must-build item, but maybe surprising not to see it on the table here.
Yeah, and it is one that you would traditionally like to see them pick up, but we might have to hold that thought here as something nefarious could be brewing around this purple buff. Rotwin gets rooted out. This could be trouble for him.
Preds with a double root. It's a good way to start the fight, but Davy and Rapio really struggling to make their presence known. They clearly just want the purple buff, does Davy, but here comes the full-on grouping. Purple buff does go down in favor of the Yomi Tanuki, so clash of heads at the purple buff goes in favor of the Chaos side.
And it's so disciplined from the Tanuki as well not to commit too hard onto that, because they do have the Khepri ult to save anybody that might be getting Fenrir ulted, but ideally you'd want to hang on to that one just because they seem to be playing very backseat right now, kind of reactionary for the Tanuki, where they're mostly watching the wards play and kind of playing around those cooldowns, and because of that, you want to be able to have all of your tools up for counter engage, right? So being able to hang on to all of those resources, not go too hard for the purple buff, understanding that there's nothing to be gained there other than just making sure that farm goes down. So disciplined and so smart from the Tanuki. I really like the way that they played that.
Yeah, played it smart, and like you said, it's how you want to play it when you have a god like a Hebo, like an Ishtar there, who this is really not their strong phase. They do not want to be fighting too hard, because looking at Ishtar only with the Bloodforge online now, Bloodforge might well be the best item in the game, but it still doesn't provide you with a ton of damage. And interestingly, Emilito here going for the Transcendence and just finishing it off, fully stacking it before 10 minutes. This Heimdall is really going to be hitting hard.
Yeah, he's been cooking that one up for a while now, you're absolutely right. And Transcendence, make no mistake, is not a staple ADC item right now. I think that we're going to see a lot more of the build that Davy has. This Bloodforge immediately into the crit has been pretty popular recently. The Transcendence is mostly in a Heimdall-specific item. You could argue maybe stuff like Marty Chorus, you can see he's got that one as well, or Uller. These traditional ability-based hunters that just want their abilities to hit as hard as possible can still look to pick that one up. It's still a ton of power, really good cooldown reduction as well, keeps your mana sustained where ordinarily you would struggle with that because you have the Hunter's Cowl. It's just an all-around well-purposed item to kind of jack of all trades, Swiss Army knife, do what the Heimdall player might be looking for. Whereas across the way, Davy is looking for very effective, cost-efficient items. Bloodforge kind of falls in that conversation. It's a little bit more expensive, but does a whole lot for you.
Well, some aggression between the tier 1 and tier 2 of the Yomi Tanuki. Preds is the target, but Ice takes the most damage as Kana all the way on over from the solo lane. Ice so low, but leaps away over the title surge coming up from Rapio. Now, it looks like Rotwin might be the target instead. Gunter catches them from behind. There's the slow from the acid rain. The stalk prey to speed everyone up. And First Blood finally goes down 11 minutes into the game, and the Yomi Tanuki, well, I thought they might look at the Gold Fury, but they're happy with just the kill for now.
And that's so smart from the Yomi Tanuki, be it Kana or whoever it is that made that call. You'd like to assume that it was a solo laner that called that one out. They've been playing so aggressively around all of these purple buffs so far. They tried the invade previously, it didn't work out. They've been posturing on the left side of the map for so long. It was very clear that the Wargs were going to be going for that invade again. So Kana just clears the wave. He's got the Golden Blade to give him some AoE damage on those waves, which makes him clear very effectively and allows him to rotate the map much more efficiently. He just gets all the farm in right, walks over to left, and immediately shows up for that contest. That is such a well-timed rotation for them to defend the purple and get that first blood. Does unfortunately mean that they're apparently going to be losing the Pyromancer on the back end of it, but still, just a very good macro play to kind of slow down the train that the Wargs have been.
Yeah, good macro play from the Tanuki, of course, because, you know, if you are going to drop the kill, you might as well get the objective, because the Tanuki already have a decent gold lead, only from the one Pyromancer and the tier 1 tower in left lane. Ishtar, of course, one of those gods that really struggles with intense pressure, and I guess the Tanuki have noticed that, and they've decided that is where they're going to focus their efforts. It's where the biggest lead is really showing at the moment. I wonder if that will continue on, but grouping in the mid lane means some more action might be brewing soon.
Yeah, and it is worth noting as well, the person to go down there was Rotwin on this Aphrodite, and that is something you can expect to see a whole lot more of. These healers are very, very powerful tools if you can keep them alive. However, that makes them traditionally the first target in these team fights, especially something like an Aphrodite or a Hell, which can make such a huge impact on the team fight, but don't have a whole lot of mobility to work with. If you can surround them, if you can jump on them, ambush them, catch them by surprise, choke them out, there's a whole lot of different ways that you can deal with this pick that ordinarily could be your X factor in these fights, but is a little bit more prone to getting caught out. So I like the attention to detail from the Wargs to realize that's probably their premier target, but now they're looking at Marty.
Gunter goes into the sky and actually still positioning aggressively, might be considering re-engaging. Kana is back yet again, all the way over here. The rotations have been in favor of the Hercules instead of the Ratatasker, but this time they don't manage to catch anyone. Looks like the Yomi Tanuki more than aware that that trick was possibly coming out again.
And look what Deathwalker's doing a second time in a row here. You get the rotation from Kana, Deathwalker just walks over to the blue buff and takes that one away. And will actually go back in on Rapio.
Tons of damage onto Rapio, but Kana's there to provide some CC. Ice and Rotwin now show up. Everyone's fighting, and it's really awkward the way that these teams are engaging on each other. No one ever really in a prime position to fight, and I guess that's why we're not seeing too heavy commitments coming through, but Deathwalker now has quietly built up a bit of a level lead here.
And that'll happen when you've got your solo laner rotating early on so often to kind of take the pressure off the other sides of the map, because make no mistake, the Tanukis have had the grasp of this game from pretty much 10 minutes forward. And it's really been seemingly put on Kana's shoulders to be able to take some of that pressure away. But that does mean that he's going to miss out on some of these waves. He's not always going to be able to secure the farm they do traditionally like to get over here in the solo lane, especially against somebody like Deathwalker, who hasn't rotated a single time to any of these engagements because, well, frankly, Judas, he hasn't been needed for any of it.
Nope,
they've handled it pretty much without him, even at the man disadvantage. So Deathwalker's just been chilling in lane, farming up, getting the levels, and invading these blue buffs as often as possible. So as long as the Tanukis can keep forcing Kana to rotate and not lose anything too significant for that rotation, it's going to be a very good look for the Tanuki going forward.
Oh, Rapio catches a good angle at the zeros and does a ton of damage, but not quite enough damage, as retreating away will be zeros on the Discordio, but that opens the window for the Wargs to go for this Gold Fury. It's burning down real fast. Have to see if they can make an engagement in, but the Niflheim Wargs do manage to secure it. How does the fight look after the fact? There's the blades through, getting tons of stuns out, and that is Emelito falling down. Ice low too, but here comes Deathwalker. Deathwalker finds the angle, gets 3 knockups, just takes the 1 kill. The Niflheim Wargs look to put themselves back roughly even on the gold shots.
And they chip away and finally manage to find something onto Gunther here. Marty might be in danger.
No mana to speak of. Ends up just being Kana pushing on in, getting aggressive, gets the kill, and that is a really good engagement again for the Wargs, who took the extended engagement and then get the Pyromancer afterwards.
And Marty does manage to cling on to both of those relics despite the aggression, which means that Ice is actually the one that has to trade out both of those resources despite going down. So the fact that they managed to successfully land that kill onto Ice and keep Gunther alive and all of his relics up is so incredibly critical to the way that that fight went, because they managed to get the better end of that Goldfree fight. It's once again Kana forcing the issue, making these early rotations, trying to facilitate the macro gameplay on the other parts of the map, despite being on the most isolated lane. And Deathwalker's just behind on all these rotations. I mean, it is keeping him very far ahead, but it's been constantly the Tanukis having to react a man down. And because of that, they've started to lose some of their advantage. Deathwalker's maintaining his individual lead, but to do that, they're kind of sacrificing the rest of the map. They're making it so that everybody has to play with this man disadvantage. They don't have the ability to pull these objectives. It's always been the Wargs kind of setting the pace after the fact that Kana just started rotating. So now it's the Tanuki pretty much equalized at this point, despite the early lead they got off to. As long as the Wargs can keep this solo lane relatively afloat, their game plan of somehow getting Kana to the fight ahead of Deathwalker on this Ratatosker seems to be incredibly effective.
I love the three-manning in the grass just to wait for the opportunity, and instead they just decide to all show face. Now, I'm sure the Yomi are more than aware that the enemies are hiding out in there, and there in fact will be Preds peeking out and Rapio just rotating away. Look at where Deathwalker is right now, but hold on, Rotwin instead gets pressed onto, puts out tons of damage in return though from Zeros, as Deathwalker will back to base from the enemy Phoenix, Connor from behind.
And he's going to get the Marty Chorus ult and the Hercules ult, and somehow manage to live through that is Zeros. Very impressive, but now the Wargs are looking for more trouble.
Looking in to push down this tier 1 tower. Looks like they will get it, but here comes Deathwalker again from the sky. Pushing in and trying to get everyone all at once. Double stun comes out from Ice. Connor picks up, but Ice will fall instead. Now that's a massive stun from Davy as Zeros has to retreat. Dashing in is Connor onto Rotwin. This Aphrodite, the sacrificial lamb, surely to fall. Emilito, meanwhile, split pushing on the left-hand side. Gonna be shut down by Connor with the teleport.
Yeah, he's going to rotate just in time to save that, but what a fight from the Wargs there. They managed to successfully utilize that stealth ability of this Marty Chorus to kind of hang out in those bushes, make sure that nobody knows that they're necessarily got that many numbers, and they just force all of the relics off of Rotwin on this Aphrodite, or at the very least force the ult out. Deathwalker looking for more on the right-hand side, gets the beads off of Rapio. But this is what we were talking about earlier, Judas. You just focus down this Aphrodite, make sure that she has to use those cooldowns when she's not really looking to, use them for self-heal as opposed to facilitate for the rest of their team. And it's once again Kana. I feel like I'm saying his name constantly, but the man is everywhere on this map so far. And granted, Deathwalker does manage to come in and save that engagement with an excellent through the Cosmos, but this Hercules has just been everywhere that they need him exactly at the time that they need him there. And it's so far been the only thing keeping the Wargs in the game. This should have been a game that the Tanukis have a stranglehold of, just because their macro of the map, the way that they've been farming, the pressure that they've been exerting across all three lanes has been so incredibly impressive. But Kana has just been, kind of stopping the bleeding in a lot of these spots and keeping them even when traditionally they might have been behind.
Well, Yomi Tanuki need to be aware this Primal Fury is going down fast and actually no contention whatsoever. It was on the map. The Oracle vision was in favor of the Order side. So, I mean, that's going to head down there. And the chase seems to be go for Pyromancer instead. Connor, though, stemming the bleeding yet again, this time getting engaged on.
Yeah, he's going to get the ult forced out as well. Mark. They're just getting those cooldowns forced out, but this could very well be another fight around this Pyromancer. We'll have to see what they end up doing with it.
Yeah, of course, these fights around these objectives always the most important moments, and it's where you're in a sort of do-or-die situation. You can't afford to give these up freely. You need to make sure you're showing face, but of course that means that's where the engagements are going to happen, and the Pyromancer going down. It does mean that the Fire Giant's the only one available for some time, but surely it's too early for anyone to be looking at that right now.
Yeah, but they do seem to have some nefarious intent here. Emilito will crowd control immune, or at least knock up immune that pull from Kana, but they're here in force, man, and once again, Deathwalker on the opposite side of the map of anything that's going on, refusing to be here on the initial grouping, just gonna split push out this farm, and my man is eating good, Judas. Like, Deathwalker has been farming everything on this map and is a absolute behemoth right now. Fully upgraded starter, almost full build completed, going for this sort of hybrid tank build with the double flurry acorn. Now has that sigil of the old guard completely finished out, so next to immortal in a lot of these team fights. If you thought that the Wargs have been clinging on, man, it is going to be significantly more difficult for them if Deathwalker can, you know, stop farming for more than a minute or two and make an impact on these fights before Kana can get into them.
Well, Kana has been grouping with their team a little bit earlier, as we've seen. I say earlier, pretty much has been grouping, whereas Deathwalker
from minute one,
maybe
right.
has not. Yeah, I mean, the really early pickup of the teleport, right? I believe teleporting towards as early as the second purple buff spawn. Yeah. I mean, Kana showed up so fast. I can only assume that's what it was, but it's probably. All right, we are heading right back on into the game. We are 2 kills to 5 in favor of the Niflheim Wargs, who have about a 300 gold lead. Grouping at the Fire Giant coming through. Looks like one of these teams is looking to get aggressive and maybe get this big objective. Indeed, the Wargs do stop that.
Oh my god, it's already half, Judas. They're going to have to get in quick. Deathwalker in the ult.
Deathwalker in the ult, dunks down onto the back line, exactly what needs to be done. Fire Giant's very, very low, it's solo, and the Wargs willing to secure it. Ice goes down, as does Rotwin. Zeros with nowhere to go, because Connor is shoving them back exactly where they want them now. Emilito does take the left side Phoenix, but it's Phoenix for 5 people with Fire Giant. I'm not sure that's worth it for the Tanuki.
I don't know either, man. I mean, that's not a play I would necessarily make, but they very clearly had that idea from the start. If they're not even sending Emilito to that fight, that's a risk that they calculated and a risk they were willing to take. Unfortunately, it does mean that no one was able to secure the Fire Giant, or rather steal it away for the Tanuki, so the Wargs do successfully pick that one up and wipe 3 members and answer back that Phoenix. And it's just a weird fight for me from the Tanuki, right?
Yeah.
Like, they don't even bother to show up and basically trade Phoenix for Phoenix and Fire Giant. I'm pretty sure that you're at the point for this Tanuki draft where you've got to start grouping up. You can't just let all these objectives go down for free, because the Wargs have proven this entire game so far, Judas, that they are very willing to show up to these objectives in force, to take these 5-5 engagements. And the Tanukis are still seemingly not willing to continue to show up to these in force. They're still sending somebody to split push. This time it's Emilito. I mean, they've got to group up as 5. There's only so many different ways I can break that down. They just have a man disadvantage in each of these fights. And somehow, I guess not even somehow, understandably, the Wargs are coming out on top every time.
That Wargs coming out on top, they were under so much pressure early on, of course. I really didn't feel like this game was going to go this way, you know? It didn't seem like... you know, the Wargs were under, like I said, so much pressure, and it was all intentional pressure from the Tanuki, right? They weren't just getting lucky and finding good damage. Like, no, they were intending to set up in specific ways, getting set to where they needed to be, and it was all working so well for them. But the Wargs on this 5-man grouping, man, they are really powering down these lines. No, not at all. Ice Ice? Ow. Yeah, left lane Phoenix now. The contest is finally coming in. Deathwalker dives on in, gets stunned instead. Double knockup coming out from Connor. Raining fire from above is Gunter. Rapio gets another kill. Isis picks up a target, realizes that's maybe not who I want in my mouth. Has to retreat on back as Emilito gets caught. They do get the beads, but it will not be enough. Deathwalker on the retreat. At this point, the Wargs just charging down. They could end the game. They want more kills instead. Rapio gets a Scarab's Blessing to dive at the tier 1 tower. The tier 2 tower, mind you. And the Wargs now barreling into the Titan room. Wow, jumps in, lifted back up, gets grabbed by the abductor. CC chain is outstanding. The Deicide is outstanding. And the Yomi Tanuki lose this first game as the Niflheim Wargs take game number 1. Right? Like, what? Yeah. Yep. Yeah, real good, strong team fighting from the Wargs. They made it clear early on, right, with the teleport from Connor. They wanted to group as 5 as early as possible. They wanted to get to this sort of mid-game stage, this objective phase. And I don't really know what Yomi Tanuki were looking for. You know, they seem to be feeling like they had so much more time to work with than they actually had. And I mean, the Niflheim Wargs just punished them for it. They took the fire, took all the Phoenixes, and just took the game in a matter of moments.
This just ended up unlucky, and because of that, you know, you have to make some smaller adjustments to the way that a couple of things went. But it really was for the Tanuki the entirety of this game. Just they had the disadvantage. I mean, they will have to make some big changes if they're going to be going into the second game of just the way that they played the map. There's not any one particular engagement, any one fight, any one single pick or god on this draft for the Wargs that was a big issue. It was just the way that they addressed this map. It just didn't seem as prepared as the Wargs were at any point in time.
Well, we have seen what the Wargs can do. We'll have to see how the Tanuki can do as we all go away for a quick break and make some adjustments. But do not go anywhere, because after a short time, we'll be back for game number 2. We'll have to see if the Tanuki can turn this around, or this game will be going to the Wargs. And welcome back, everybody, to Phase 1 of the EUSCC. We have just seen the Niflheim Wargs take a great victory against the Yomi Tanuki. It was absolutely outstanding play in some ways, and in a way that I've never seen before. A play style that really caught me off guard. I'm sure it caught the Yomi Tanuki off guard as well, and I'm wondering if we're going to see a bit more of that now for game number 2.
Yeah, the say what you will, man. The things that they did in game number 1 certainly seemed to work. That they definitely were things, and they worked. But I don't know. It's just like the things that the Wargs did, I don't feel like should have caught the Tanukis off guard. Like, it was very vanilla Smite as far as I'm concerned. They just showed up to objectives. They had all 5 players there. They teleported their solo laner, and they took the fights. That should be things that the Tanuki were very willing to respond to and very accustomed to seeing. But I don't know, the Tanuki seemed very off balance that entire game. They just continued to send members off by themselves to split push and just assumed in all lanes at all times. Deathwalker pushed every lane at some point during that game. But it just seemed like they thought, oh, well, we'll take the 4v5, it'll be fine, and then we'll get rewarded for split pushing. But you know, every single time, the Wargs just grouped up, forced the fight, and seemed to take the better of it each time.
Well, if the game plan is to split push in all 3 lanes at once, maybe you can see a composition drafted more around that as we head on into picks and bans for game number 2. I do wonder if those situations that the Yomi Tanuki found themselves in, were those things that they manufactured? Like, I can understand split pushing when you know where the enemy is, right? If they're grouping as a 5, aiming at your left Phoenix, you can split push in another lane, but I don't know if they intended to do it quite so much.
Yeah, I don't know either, and it could very well be they got caught off guard and that was just the best that they could have made of the situation. Like, at some point it really is. If you are not prepared, you might as well try to get something, and it's entirely possible that they just kept getting caught off guard by the Wargs. But I mean, at that point, I don't know, you got to have better vision, you got to have a better understanding of what the enemy's game plan is. There needs to be some kind of significant adjustment that the Tanukis make here, is basically what I'm getting at, Judas. And my question mark is whether or not that's even going to come in the picks and bans phase. Because I wouldn't say necessarily that any of the picks that they left open for the enemy team or that they grabbed themselves were an issue there. I think that each one had merit, and I think that we saw the benefit of each one of those picks. They were ahead in the early game. They had a good control of the map in the early game. And it wasn't really until the team fight stage where things really started to hit the fan. So I would almost say just stick with the game plan you had. It didn't work game number 1. Understand that there's a reason that you went for that draft in the first place. It's supposed to work a different way. Just wipe game number 1 from your memory and then go into game 2 looking fresh.
Yeah, sometimes, you know, you get these games which were very close, and, you know, sometimes you get situations where in a 50-50 could have gone either way, and, you know, maybe you can just run it back. However, with the way that Yomi Tanuki took their fights, I wouldn't say there was a whole lot of 50-50 going on. They were just in positions where they were struggling to really finish off anyone and even get close. Like, don't forget, there was still a Khepri on the side of the Niflheim Wargs who never once got a revive off with the Scarab's Blessing, at least not one that I saw. If you can't even get to the revive, how are you going to get through everyone else? Well, we are seeing the Aphrodite banned away by the Yomi Tanuki. Maybe they felt it didn't quite benefit them in the way they were expecting.
Yeah, and I don't hate that call. I'm also not in love with it. I really do think that they could have just run that one back and then made some adjustments to the gameplay. I don't think that necessarily the pieces were there. It was more how they assembled the puzzle that became the issue. They really did just kind of jam them all together, like rectangle goes in the square hole kind of vibe, and just hope for the best.
Everything goes in the square hole.
Everything goes in the square hole. If you're a programmer, you definitely know that. But I do like making this adaptation of going for the Marty. I think that this is a pretty common draft strategy when things don't work out for you, making some kind of adaptation and making not only a change for your own draft, but also taking away something that you felt was strong. Obviously, the Tanuki thought that the performance that was had on this Marty Boris was something that they don't want to run back, but that does leave open both this Evo and this Hercules.
The two H-men coming on in and showing up big. I think Hebo and Hercules together are really, really outstanding gods. You know, pretty much top of the pile. It's hard to get many gods stronger than Hercules. One of them who's probably in the conversation is Hebo. So seeing both of them coming on out this time. Now, Mercury getting locked in, that might again lend itself more towards this late game style. Now, Mercury these days, not just a late game hyper character, can get involved early on and is more than happy to do so. Would you say that's maybe a god that will handle the opposition Hebo jungle, assuming it does go there, better than maybe Fenrir did? Like, do you think they could just farm up and wait to take a better fight later?
I think that in a vacuum, the Mercury is essentially like the physical version of Hebo. Like, you are both looking to crowd control an enemy and then one-shot them before they can get to react. I think that Hebo gets that ability online perhaps a little bit sooner, but Mercury definitely can punish him with the long-range crowd control of the Sonic Boom, being able to lock him down early on with the special delivery. It might even force the Hebo to go beads instead of blink early on, which takes away a lot of the initial engagement that the Wargs jungler could potentially be looking to go. Not to mention the fact that we just saw this game go incredibly late, game number 1, just about to the enhanced Fire Giant mark. That's pretty consistent with how these games in Season 10 have been going. Having a jungler that scales into the late game and makes use of the very strong crit items that are available right now, I think this is going to be a good look for the Tanuki. Mercury is definitely my pick for, top 3 junglers. In that conversation is probably Thor as well, but I would say that Mercury definitely strong in his own right, and one that can at least contest this Hebo in his ability to scale into the late game.
Well, a god that was completely ignored at game number 1, Kerninos, taken off the board. I wonder where they found that one coming through. They decided they're going to ban it this time. Yeah. Already have the Marticarus, which does tell me, with the Marticarus and Ishtar being banned away by the Yomi Tanuki, I do get the feeling this will be a Marticarus as the hunter this time, which is a little bit of an adjustment on how the Wargs decided to play it. I asked you this, the reverse of this in game number 1, but when you put Marticarus in the carry role, do you think that might be where they look to shine a little bit more?
I think that he has some merit in the long lane. I really do believe that this is a character that should be played in the mid lane just because the lane is so much shorter and it's a little bit safer for him. We talked in game number 1 about how this character's ultimate is a very good defensive tool, but without that, he's pretty susceptible to being ganked and being taken down. So giving him a little bit less distance to have to travel to the tower where he has a little bit more safety is typically something I value pretty highly for this god, and I think that's probably why the Tanukis are looking to go for another traditional ADC here and maybe put that Marty in the mid lane. Just a lot of good value from building the penetration, building the power, which is traditionally what you want out of your mid laner, and then maybe have something like this Jingwei that, can use a dash off of all 3 of the setup CC knockups, all 4 actually, for the Wargs. What an incredible pick for this Jingwei. And also uses that crit very well. I think that it's just about the perfect pick into the composition that the Wargs have, and the fact that they got it in the bottom 2 is a little bit surprising to me.
And I know someone on the Wargs is sadly going, I knew we should have been you just know that that's come through, but we do see the drafts now finalized. So Morgan Le Fay coming on out has been very strong for year 10, of course, and still strong up until the 10.3 patch, which we are playing on. So understandable to see that god come through. But we're going to have to see exactly how these teams yet again face on up. Can the Yomi Tanuki improve their standing as we head on into game number 2 between the Yomi Tanuki and the Niflheim Wargs, who will take a 1-game lead. Now, it's week 1, Kaizo. No one wants to go down 2-0. Yomi Tanuki, I don't know, are they considering that fact, or are they just thinking, let's forget game 1, we got to win 2-0 in a row here?
Yeah, you've got to just wipe game 1 from your mind if you're the Tanukis. And actually, hang on, much more interesting talking point here. Pred starts this purple buff and just going to try to strip this one away, Judas, which is such an interesting strategy on account of the fact that that traditionally the Wargs will want to start the back camps in the green buff, and does look like manages to grab that one. Now he could be in danger, though.
Oh, no. In a lot of danger. Look at the walls coming up from Rotwin, lifted to the top. And then Preds has to burn the shell. Gets the slow from the bouncing balls.
No way.
Yeah, Melito can't find the shots. Rotwin is close. Davies even closer. Davies still hasn't finished their own purple. This might be an Uno reverse card of a purple invade. Preds will live. Tower gets the shot, but the purple buff goes to the Yomi Tanuki, and then the fight spins back around. These guys are just messing with us at this point.
I don't know, man. I mean, well played by Preds to realize that, you know, with the green buff back camp start that a lot of these dual lanes are going for to try to minimize the damage you take going into lane, the purple buff is available for an invade. I just feel like it might have been a little greedy to try to get all 3 of those minions, even after the Tanuki showed up in force to try to defend that one. But what do I know, man? Like, he manages to live and then gets the support from his ADC to be able to walk back into this lane with a relatively decently sized health bar. It's, if nothing else, a mental blow to the Tanukis, knowing that the Warg support basically got away with that one.
Basically got away, but it did, of course, cost the purple buff of Davy on this Heimdall, and it's a shame. It's not the biggest deal in the world, but of course, early on, your clear is basically comes down to attacking with those basics, and with those spread attacks from Heimdall, surely wanting to have that purple buff to make that a little bit easier, but no harm, no foul. It's a brave attempt, and didn't quite pay off for the Wargs, but something to keep an eye on in future for opposing teams, I suppose. Now, as everything settles, we've seen Rapio spend a lot of time in the mid lane. Meanwhile, Ice was rotating around, picking up little bits of extra farm. Gold buff, left side Harpies. Is that something you would have expected to see? Would you think that Hebo is going to stick in the lane for longer? I wonder why they chose to do that.
It's not very impactful either way, if I'm honest with you, as long as you're still getting that farm from somewhere. I don't think that Hebo has the best gank potential anywhere, but he's going to try here onto Deathwalker, but with Ice on the scenery, I don't think this is going to likely amount to much. But actually, I say that, Judas, they appear to be looking for this blue buff in mid.
Yeah, we did see both blue buffs get protected by the junglers in the first game. Connor really low, gets hit by one tick of the Mire, and I guess lives by the other tick, just about staying alive there. Is the Hercules. No, Ice is looping around the backside. Connor surely is aware of this. Major Look does not stop the back of Rapio, but some more aggression from the Tanuki. I think that's what they were missing in game number 1.
Yeah, and this is kind of what you can do when you have the matchup against the Hebo. He has decent damage early on, but not a whole lot of safety and not a whole lot of lockdown either or. So something like this Mercury that does good in-hand damage with those auto attacks and also has addition... it's a clown fiesta on the dual lane, Judas. I'm trying to stay professional and analyze something that matters here, like the Hebo that's actually trying to make an impact on the right-hand side, but Rotwin is not deterred, man.
Rotwin's all like honk over here, trying to get this purple buff down. Has the extra obelisk
into tower,
steal it away in the middle of everyone. Now, no mana for this Terra, absolutely nowhere to go. Rapio around for the reinforcements. There's Emilito to provide a little bit of peel, not enough peel though. And for the second time in 2 games, first blood goes the way of the Wargs.
And Rotwin's Preds impression is just not impressing me at all, because that is exactly what Preds did, just walked up 1v2 against the purple buff. The difference being, Preds didn't int himself into a tower to steal that one away and try to secure the farm and take it away from the Tanukis. Whereas Rotwin was so incredibly convinced that that was a winning invade for him that he didn't even think about the fact that Rapio was coming back from base, had just been on the right side for so long, could very well be lending his attention to the left-hand side of the map. It's just, once again, lack of understanding, it would seem, from the Tanukis to like understand what the Wargs are doing at a given time. And it feels so bad to say that, Judas, because this Tanuki roster is one of the more seasoned SCC teams that we have available in the EUC.
Yeah, right.
Almost all of these players have played in and around the SPL for the last several years and have played at the highest level. So, you know, at some level, they understand what's going on. They definitely know what they should be doing and are making these risks in a calculated fashion. It just feels bad when every time they're trying to do this, the Tanukis end up on the losing end of it, and the Wargs just seem to be like everything is coming up black for them.
Yeah, everything going well whenever they try it, it seems, have managed to scrape together about a 1,000 gold lead, which not, you know, massive, not massively impactful, but it's significant in the way that they were struggling early on in the previous game. In fact, that was pretty much the only time that the Yomi Tanuki had an advantage, was through this early phase, up until about the 12-minute mark, I think. So having this little lead now. Not that you need too much of a lead to make things happen, but Preds walks into a little bit of a shaded forest there with all those weeds, and yeah, really struggled with that ambush there. I think that's the threat of what Zeros can do. You definitely still have to respect those bushes.
Yeah, and that is so much more impactful at the high level where you can just group up a whole bunch of people there and like deprive information from the enemy team. And information in competitive Smite is so powerful. Knowing where the enemy team is, what they're doing, what the game plan's going to be, all of that is so critical to being able to play the map effectively and understand where you should be and what you should be doing. And to have something like the Marty Chorus that can deprive you of that information just by standing in a bush and making people wonder, well, I don't know, is there an entire enemy team in this bush? And should I be worried about walking past it? Or am I going to walk up here very cautiously and then feel like an idiot when it's completely empty?
Oh, Deathwalker being dove goes into the Descent of Madness, but it does not matter. Rapio, connecting with all the damage, gets another kill on the board for the Niflheim Wargs, and it's just not really happening for the Tanuki here. They had been trying to push the envelope a little bit, but now it seems to be the Wargs who are getting the better end of it.
And that's kind of what you can do to this Cthulhu early on, to hold that thought. Mercurial grabs Preds and pulls him back in.
Pulls him back in, and Preds pulls himself right back out with a Riptide now. That's the oh man, the Sonic Boom.
Sonic Boom.
That's right. That's the Sonic Boom
He's
off
got
the
it.
mark, and it's always the place you want to use it, right? Is that dual lane in that sort of situation, but just didn't connect with it this time.
And Rapio is on the scenery. He's got the Mercury following behind him. Could be more trouble.
We'll get some damage onto Amelito, who flies into danger. There's a root from Rotwin. No mana, though, for the Terra. Amelito booped up in to the River's Rebuke and can't fly on away. More water. The Team Water team coming through as Rapio picks up yet another kill. Rotwin caught again by the Riptide. Stunned out. I think this is going to be another kill for Rapio, sweeping up all of the setup coming out from Preds.
And Preds with the dual lane clinic there in the support role, making this Yemoja look good. Yemoja is easily one of our highest skill capacity characters in Smite. Very easy to play all right, but very difficult to play incredibly well. And Preds looks so comfortable on this pick. That was such a great wall to keep Rotwin into the tower area so that no one could help him out, but they could get all the damage in the world onto him. And then hitting those hoops as well, keeping that support in long enough that they can secure that kill onto that Terra, looking incredibly comfortable here and very impressive on this Yemoja.
Yeah, it's the water team synergy, as I was touching on. Rapio with the Hebo and Preds on the Yemoja, but Deathwalker in trouble again. No, Descent to Madness this time, but yet another title surge. Rapio 5-0, Doom Orb full, another item on the way. This Hebo's getting real scary.
He has every single kill on this map, not just on his team, because there's no kills going the other way. My man's got every single kill to occur in this entire game. And yet, remarkably, Judas, he's not impossibly far ahead of this Mercury.
No.
1,000 gold is an incredibly large amount of gold at 9 minutes in, but the fact that he is not just 6,000 gold ahead is representative of the fact that Ice has still been farming this map even though things haven't been going his way. And that's really what you need to do when you're playing against somebody that's trying to get this active early on. You got to keep the farm going.
Looking at Gunter, the beads comes out way in advance from Gunter, but I think that is probably what saved their life. Now, the Sonic Boom still available for Ice, but with no success on the dual lane, ended up turning their attention to the mid lane, and I think these lanes need it right now, because when Rapio is such a threat, that's when you need your junglers to come help you out.
Rotwin trying to contest onto Gunter, meanwhile fighting in the duo lane shouldn't amount to much, but the mid lane's where all the action is as Zeros gets aggressive. Rotwin taking a whole bunch of damage.
Gunter slashing and slicing, doesn't quite have the last hit. The knock-up immunity coming up from Rotwin, but the Riptide still gets caught by the knock-up immunity. Now Zeros goes to the sky, might be looking to take down Rapio with help of the tower, but they will not be able to. Deathwalker and Ice dive onto Kana in the right lane and do pick up one kill, trade their life out to the tower. Finally, the Tanuki on the board, but the Wargs still putting all their eggs into Rapio.
Man, Rapio is not to be outdone on this Hebo, man. He wants every single drop of farm from these kill bounties, and he has certainly gotten it. It is incredibly impressive also that Ice is managing to make something happen on the map despite that fact. They successfully got that dive onto the Hercules, managed to bring him down. It does require, of course, that the Cthulhu ends up dying as a result of it. But, I mean, if you're dying to the tower as opposed to the enemy laner, that's always going to be worth it as long as you can get the kill and trade.
And of course, we discussed having, the hyper farm of Mercury possibly coming through, and Cthulhu already dying twice. Cthulhu doesn't need that kill. Cthulhu will become relevant later on anyway. It doesn't really matter if they get this early kill. I say relatively early kill. Rapio's got tons of them. Rapio could just be giving them out if they wanted to, but actually having the kill onto the Mercury, means that this Mercury will come online that much earlier, and it's just available to be able to actually have an impact on the map, because Rapio's just outshining everyone right now.
Yeah, and I do think that some additional attention needs to be lended to this solo lane, because I don't know if you checked out the build that we've got for Deathwalker, but my man's got damage, and he's got a whole bunch of it. He went first item Spear of Desolation, which is a very cheap penetration option that gives you a lot of power. We traditionally see that something that mid laners would be picking up to get a little bit more damage early on, make it so that you can trade a little bit more effectively. But Deathwalker seems to believe that he needs the additional damage either for the lane clear or being able to trade more effectively. And that's really opened up opportunities like this one on the right-hand side.
Ooh. Catch on the Gunter, the stun comes through from the walls and no beads, of course, but Deathwalker in a bit more danger as they do get clubbed down. Finally, a kill goes to someone else on the Wargs, and Rapio, I bet, is upset about that one. But Yomi Tanuki turn their attention to this Pyromancer with Pred's on the scene.
Yeah, and I just love the way that Rapio's been playing this, and now he's on the scenery here as well. Xera's takes down Preds, but Rotwin is also low.
That was the Pyromancer going the way of the Yomi Tanuki. Kana and Rapio right on cue, but didn't quite manage to steal that objective away. This game certainly coming to life a lot more. They really don't want Deathwalker getting that blue buff.
No, and I think that is absolutely the way you need to play against this Cthulhu, especially if he's going to be building this much power. He has no protections pretty much anywhere in his build. That tower shield, that contagion, or the tier 1 of it rather, the tainted steel, is not going to be providing you sufficient defense to be able to live through these engagements. So Rapio has just been farming his map traditionally, like doing the camps, doing the rotation, and then just walking over and farming the Deathwalker buff, because my man is fully dying to just one combo. One rotation of abilities from Kana and Rapio is currently enough to just take down Deathwalker from 100% HP. And Deathwalker is still, despite that fact, content to dash these waves, clear the wave as aggressively as he would like, and not really getting a whole lot of value in return. He is now 3 levels down, which is so much different than game number 1, where, he was sporting the 2-level lead despite the fact that the rest of the map wasn't going so well. This is a completely different situation for them.
The situation on the left-hand side is that Rotwin getting aggressive onto Gun against the beads and the ultimate, I think that was. But now Rotwin getting body blocked by Preds. Preds really does not want this Terror going anywhere. The teleports coming in from Kana. We saw this game number 1, repeating game number 2, grouping at the Gold Fury, and the Wargs have the positional advantage.
Yeah, Deathwalker no TP available, so he's going to go the old-fashioned way. Wargs have this very low.
Ice all the way on the backside, though. Gold Fury's very, very low. In the meantime, Wargs will manage to secure it for themselves. Kana now and Rapio, the tag team duo of the solo lane, coming in. And Kana's not giving this one up. Wants to get in. Ice is waiting for the wrong person to be in the wrong position, but can't end up getting it. Rotwin falls. The Gold Fury falls. Wargs are in a fantastic position.
Yeah, and this is shades of game number 1 as well, because don't forget, Kana made these rotations and successfully got the rest of the map ahead on account of the fact that he was there and Deathwalker was not. Difference being, game number 1, Deathwalker was split pushing on the Ratatosker. He has a little bit more damage, he has some more mobility and more safety to be able to farm the map more effectively, and he managed to get that small, or actually at certain stages of the game, very large lead over Kana on the Hercules. This time around, though, 0-4 coming out of the solo lane, not being able to see a whole lot of value. And despite that fact, the Wargs are still managing to get all of the value on the other parts of the map, taking down the Gold Fury, invading these blue buffs. This is basically the same strategy that we saw from the Tanuki in Game 1, except this time their solo laners behind instead of ahead.
Yeah, attempting the same strategy, still putting some pressure on the dual lane. I actually thought that Davey there might have been penned in a little bit, like a rat trapped in a cage sort of thing. My man turns, sees the Mercury behind him, and starts pinging him while walking at him like, oh, guys, I found someone. Found a target we can collapse on. They don't end up collapsing on Ice. Does end up retreating on out of there, but that just shows the difference in situation, right? Previously, the Wargs were under a lot of pressure, struggling across the map despite maintaining a relatively even and healthy difference. But now, actually the ones ahead, and feel like they're going to be the ones making all the plays around these upcoming objectives.
Yeah, Gunter trades a bit of damage, but you're totally right. It's definitely going to be the Wargs that have the grip of this gameplay, at least right now. I mean, there's not a whole lot that the Yomi Tanuki can do when they're this far behind. They've just got to farm up the map, which, to their credit, they seem very accustomed to doing that. That is absolutely within their bounds of capability to just sit back and farm the map. But they're going to have to find some good opportunity to break back into this game, and it might have to come on the back of Ice. You can see him looking for this gank in the dual lane position very deep behind that tier 1 tower. That's a very traditional spot for a Mercury to look for these dual lane ganks. He is the member of their team that is the farthest ahead. Granted, his lane opponent, for lack of a better term, is this 6-0 Hebo, so it doesn't look like he's very far ahead, but he's at least got the damage required.
So Sonic Boom in the middle lane, but Gunter counters that one out with those runes. Gets up and starts slashing away to safety. Now, the grouping and the intention seems to be at this Pyromancer. The Niflheim Wargs are, again, in prime position. It's all about what the Tanuki can do to get in on this. They're looking to loop around the backside. Deathwalker in a good spot, and the Yomi Tanuki do steal it away. Now, the fight afterwards means that Gunter is very low health and has to retreat from this fight. Deathwalker can't quite get close enough to carry their team on forward. The Rockman's still alive. Rapio trying to find some damage. Deathwalker might be the target. Doesn't get lifted to the sky. Rapio doesn't care. Rapio wants to get in there and get this kill, but loses the beads in the process. Zero's forced into the ult. At the end of the day, Yomi Tanuki trade 1 for Pyro.
And the Wargs managed to bounce back, though, and make something out of nothing there. It looked like they might have only been able to grab the Pyromancer, but a good engage will net them as well the cooldown, or excuse me, the defensive tool of Zero's in that ultimate. And additionally, another kill onto Deathwalker, who is now 0-5 on this largely damage build Cthulhu, only now after the 5th death going into a bit more magic defense. This is a grim situation if you're a Yomi Tanuki fan, because Rapio has looked lights out on this Hebo so far. Very good understanding of these damage thresholds, playing around them perfectly, knows exactly how much damage and how much time, more importantly, it's going to take him to get any one of these kills. He has certainly made some pretty good impact on the map so far, and now starting to round out the build with some of these more core items. Now has Dorada Tahuti online. That's a very big power spike for him. The Wargs, if you thought they were playing aggressively before, have been given even more license to do what they would please with this map on account of the fact that now this gold lead's starting to look a little bit more impactful, and these neutral objectives being a much more reasonable commitment of their time.
Yeah, and they've always been aggressive, but with purpose, and the purpose will now probably shift to the Oni Fury being up on the left-hand side. And yet again,
look at Kana
teleports in on the left-hand side. Now, they do spot it out this time. Amelito, though, still stepping up, really wants to take this fight against Davey, juking out all of the Riptides, gets the lift from the sky, but Kana does get the stun as well. Will be a retreat for the Yomi Tanuki dual lane in the dual lane as Zeros forced to the sky again because Rapio's just that threatening, while the Wargs take another position around this objective.
Yeah, Zeros gets caught and has that cooldown forced out, and now Deathwalker still not here, has the teleport available to show up to this one, but the Wargs aren't going to wait for it.
Wargs aren't waiting. Rotwin's the only one here to contest. Now, Terra's not the best at stealing objectives, but can be a little bit of a pain, but that will be that. They are going to give it up in order to split push a little bit more. We're seeing Yomi Tanuki go back to the tried and tested strategy, which didn't actually work game 1, but maybe it'll work a bit better in this game number 2.
And they do manage to take down the tower in right, also net for themselves a tower in left, which shores up those gold gaps at least a little bit more with that global gold distributed to all members. It is a much better position in game number 2 here than they were in game 1. This is about the time that, you know, Fire Giant was starting to be flirted with by the Wargs, that they were starting to group up and see a lot more advantage from these fights. But looks like the Tanukis are having a much more successful time with this game plan. They've got zeros on lock. This Marty Chorus has not made a significant impact on this game at all so far. It seems like Rapio is making a very, very impressive performance on this map, preventing just about anybody from the Tanukis, from playing aggressively or really looking for any opportunities of their own.
Yeah, they've not really been able to do anything that wasn't on the terms of the Wargs. Of course, did manage to steal away that Pyromancer, which is always good. You know, it's always handy to get a little bit of a steal in, and actually the Runic Bomb goes the way of Deathwalker. So that Cthulhu's certainly going to be hard to stop if they do decide there is somewhere they want to place that bomb. But, you know, Cthulhu's had a bit of a breather. We've seen Rapio slow the pace down just a touch. Still with the gold lead in favor of the Wargs, though. Surely they just got to be looking for this next Pyro, and then surely the Fire Giant afterwards.
Yeah, Pyro due to spawn here, you're absolutely right, and they're going to go ahead and grab Rotwin and put some damage on him, and he could be in some pretty serious danger here, actually, caught by all members, but with the objective spawning, the Wargs will back up, and I think this one should be going down for free.
Yeah, it looks to be that way. We do see a half-hearted attempt from Zeros to try to get some Acid Rain over on the wall. Amelito still split pushing up. It does mean that Davey will have to respond in kind and can't allow the Niflheim Wargs to pull this Fire Giant. But at some point, they're going to hit the goal button. And what do you think the Yomi Tanuki have to deal with a Fire Giant presence, right? They're not that far behind, so maybe they can actually put up a good fight.
Yeah, I was actually just looking at that, and the Yomi Tanuki, despite the fact that it feels like the Wargs have had a stranglehold on this game, aren't actually as far behind as it might seem. Only about 3,000 gold. That's pretty much been the consistent margin that it's been for a large part of this game going into the middle game. They're not really hemorrhaging any additional farm, getting some pretty critical items onto the people that need it. Now a dominance finished for this Jing Wei, giving her much more additional percent penetration on her auto attacks, making it so that Preds can't stand as comfortably in front of her. You've got the Deathbringer now online for Ice, making those auto attacks hit harder. Some more percent pen for this mid laner on Zeros. They've got the tools required to fight back into this game at this point, and you know, despite being at disadvantage, they've largely got the tools they need in order to fight back into this one.
Well, the Niflheim Wargs do decide they are ready to take it. They have got Connor rotated over. Meanwhile, Deathwalker still over in left lane. They have dropped the objective and are looking for the fight instead. Who will be the target? Right now it's Zeros, but it's only Rapio close enough. Connor blinking on in as well, but that's a big relic to lose in that situation. Red shows up in the middle lane. There's the double knockup from Rapio. Still trying to get back in. They finally catch Emelito. No driving strike to combine it with, though. And now they're just looking for a tier 1 siege instead.
Yeah, it should be for free because, again, Deathwalker is split pushing another lane. Dual lane once more.
Walker.
This man, I have never seen a solo laner more content to let things go on the map just so he can feast on these farm
You
lanes.
haven't seen my casual
because of that, the Wargs are just going to grab this Fire Giant.
Well, they're grabbing it. Let's see if they can keep hold of it because they've let it go. Yet again, took a look for the fight after the fact. I'm sure, and finally we do see Deathwalker over here. I'm sure the Wargs are expecting Deathwalker to finally stop split pushing and actually group with the team, but still getting set up. What do you think the Yomi Tanuki are doing that's stopping the Niflheim Wargs from feeling comfortable to just take the fight?
It's just the fact that they have the damage on the characters that they need it. Ice is very capable of one-shotting a backliner with the items that he has. That Deathbringer is such a powerful power spike for him, allowing him to get those kills at a moment's notice if these backliners step up too far or end up out of position. And then Zeros and Emelito have been here on cooldown every single time the Wargs have been trying to do something, and Rotwin is just tanky enough to stand in front of them. They're flirting with some pretty thin margins here, Judas, but they definitely have all of the core pieces. Their front line has the items required to stand in front. Their back line has the items required to deal the damage and actually pose a threat despite the farm disadvantage that they're at, which allows Deathwalker to just look for more of this farm on the map. If you're looking at Ice being a little bit farther behind, if you're looking at these items potentially not giving too much penetration, then maybe this is a different game state.
Well, with the Yomi Fury, with the Gold Fury going down the way of the Yomi Tanuki, the Wargs are certain that they have the man advantage, and this time we'll try to burn it. Knight's River's Rebuke, but the Fire Giant's still low. It's very low, but the Wargs do manage to get it. Now Ice dashes into the backline with the Sonic Boom, and dashes on right back out because they haven't got a good angle. Now Rotwin is low. Deathwalker goes big and is trying to peel for their team, making the space that Cthulhu does tend to do. It's full on retreat now for the Wargs, and the Yomi Tanuki smell that is time to get engaging in. Rotman with a good stun. Low, but the turnaround is even better. Connor taking down 2 kills as the fight tips on its head in just a moment. A rope-a-dope from the Wargs. Triple kill for Connor. Full deicide, and the Wargs are looking to burn down one of these Phoenixes.
Yeah, they might even be able to go for the game here, Judas. Very long respawn timers, and the Wargs just catch the Yomi Tanuki trying to step too far forward. They didn't like the way that engagement went. They thought that that was their critical moment that they could potentially punish the overstay from the Wargs, but they were very ready, funneled into the choke point, and now funneling into this Titan.
It's just Rotwin. Rotwin is alive, already knocked up, and already loses that life. Wow! Goodbye to that. Goodbye to this game. And so long and farewell to the Yomi Tanuki, because the Niflheim Wargs get off to a 2-0 start to start this first phase of the EUSCC.
Yeah, a truly roaring start from them as well, putting down what I thought to be one of potentially the favorite teams in this section. I think that a lot of people would be surprised to see some of these names going down in 2-0 fashion, and it wasn't for uncharacteristic gameplay, you know, as ineffective as it seemed to be, just on account of how strong the Wargs were playing. This is a game plan that, you know, people like Ice Zeros, Deathwalker, Emilito, this split push and then show up to the fight is something that they've been doing for years. I mean, Emilito made a name for himself playing the Kronos, the Jingwei, the Apollo, these split push picks, and then showing up to the team fight later on. But the Wargs just had their number, man. They did not falter in the face of this map pressure from the Tanukis, and just always had the advantage in these team fights.
The Yomi Tanuki being restricted to only 5 kills this entire set. Fantastic statement from the Wargs. We said they wanted to make one, and it's absolutely a very loud and clear statement coming through. Rapio had more kills in the first 10 minutes than Yomi Tanuki managed this whole set. It was just a fantastic showing all across the board from the Wargs, and maybe a few more teams might be picking their eyes at this team, thinking, wow, these could be a real threat this phase.
Yeah, and if you're going to look at something from this set, it's got to be the jungle solo performance, because while, you know, the mid-core, the dual lane played very well, they had some interesting things going on in dual lane that potentially caught the Tanukis by surprise. The core of this composition really did seem to be Rapio getting very active early on, making his impact known on all 3 lanes on the map. And Kana with these rotations, man, he could not be understated how impactful he was in that set. Every single time he showed up to one of these fights, it ended up going in favor of the Wargs, and he is truly the one like carrying their banner, carrying their flag into battle with them and leading the charge.
Leading the charge all the way through, as we have been leading the broadcast today, because do not forget, we are done now, but coming right up next will be the SPL, so do not go anywhere. Make sure you tune in for the rest of the games today.